information. Go ahead and share the screen. Hold on one moment.
Thank you.
No problem.
Does the screen share? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Good morning, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy for the Department of Taxation. Today, our hope is to give you an overview of the tax for tobacco products. Just briefly as a generalization, in 1983, this tax was imposed to create a 30% excise tax on manufacturer wholesale price for the distribution of other tobacco products in the state of Nevada. One other change that happened briefly was in 1991. There was an exemption created in the statutes for other tobacco products which were displayed or exhibited at a trade show, and those again were determined to be exempt. We've offered you a few tax facts here. Other tobacco products are distributed 100% to the state general fund. And the taxes collected you'll see here on the screen in fiscal year 19 were approximately 18 million. Fiscal year 2020, we were up to about 23 million. And in fiscal year 21, that was up to approximately 32 million. A little bit of specificity with regard to the other tobacco products excise tax set forth in NRS 370.450. To clarify, the tax is imposed on the wholesale dealer of other tobacco products. At the time other tobacco products is first possessed or received by a wholesale dealer who maintains a place of business in the state for the sale or disposition in the state, when we talk about when the tax is imposed. Alternatively, the tax could be imposed at the time the other tobacco products is sold by an out-of-state wholesale dealer to a tobacco retail dealer or ultimate consumer in the state of Nevada. And finally, the tax could be imposed for other tobacco product that is manufactured, produced, assembled, labeled, or finished in the state. It will be imposed at the time the other tobacco product is sold in the state of Nevada to a wholesale dealer, retail dealer, or the ultimate consumer. Again, we're just reiterating here that there is the exemption. What is not taxable is the tax for OTP that is displayed, exhibited, or distributed free of charge at a trade show, convention, or other exhibition. We also wanted to give some clarity to the distinction between other tobacco products and cigarettes. Both of those terms are defined in our statutes. Cigarettes, of course, mean any rolled tobacco or substitute thereof that is wrapped in paper or any substitute other than tobacco, irrespective of the size, shape, or whether or not the tobacco is flavored, adulterated, or mixed with any other ingredients. On the other hand, other tobacco products mean any version of tobacco that is essentially not a cigarette. So this is going to include vapor products, other alternative nicotine products, and any other product when it comes to tobacco that's not considered. On the next slide, of course, we give better examples of OTP, which include cigars, pipe tobacco, chewing tobacco, snuff, other alternative nicotine products, synthetic nicotine products, what is more commonly known today as vapor products. We also have, of course, electronic cigarettes, hookah, and vape. All of these components, or any of these components of these products or devices are deemed to be other tobacco products in the state of Massachusetts. And finally, I thought it would be prudent to clarify what we define as an other tobacco product wholesale dealer. A wholesaler is one who brings or causes product to be brought into Nevada that was purchased from a manufacturer or wholesaler if they sell or otherwise dispose of this product in Nevada. Alternatively, it is one who manufactures or produces other tobacco products within the state and who sells or distributes those other tobacco products in Nevada to other wholesale dealers, retail dealers, or the ultimate consumer. And finally, a wholesale dealer could be one who purchases other tobacco products solely for the purpose of resale to retailers in the state. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Deputy Roebuck, to continue.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jennifer Roebuck, Deputy Director of Compliance in the Department of Taxation. So I'll go ahead and continue with the licensing requirements. NRS 370-567 requires those who intend to engage in the tobacco business to first secure a license in each type of business activity, including wholesale, retail, vending, logistics, warehouse distribution, and manufacturing. Note that in the previous slide, NRS 370-440 includes in the OTP wholesale dealer definition those who do not maintain a place of business in this state, but sell such product by any means to an in-state retail dealer or ultimate consumer in this state. OTP licenses are privileged, and it's a rigorous application process. OTP wholesale dealers undergo an in-depth review, and a background check is performed by the Attorney General's office on all officers, owners, members, and the company. The AG sends the recommendation to the department. The department then finalizes the review to determine issuance of a license. All local and state licensing must be in order prior to the license being issued by the Department of Taxation. All out-of-state companies applying for a license must have a Nevada registered agent for service of process. If no issues are found during the review and background check, and all required licensing is in order, the license will be issued by the department. If issues are found, such as past tobacco crimes or taxes are owed in another state, the department has the authority to deny the license. Prior to 2020, there were no OTP wholesaler licensing requirements or tobacco retail licensing requirements or renewal requirements. 2019 legislative session approved several tobacco licensing fees, including a $650 wholesale other tobacco product dealer's license fee, as well as an annual renewal requirement. Renewal license fees are due and payable on January 1st of each year, otherwise the license is canceled. A canceled license can be renewed with payment of the fee and a penalty. A licensed wholesale dealer is authorized to purchase and possess OTP from unlicensed entities located out of state for resale to another wholesale dealer or retail dealer. Wholesale dealers are required to keep complete records for every transaction for every facility for not less than 5 years on the premises. Records may be centralized with permission from the department, but the records must be transmitted within 24 hours upon request. 370-413 provides the authority to search for evidence of any violation of Chapter 370. In order to obtain evidence, the department, its agents, and all peace officers and revenue collecting officers of the state may enter and inspect without a warrant during normal business hours and with a warrant at any other time. NRS 370-460 says it's unlawful to sell products on which tax is not paid. It's unlawful for any person to sell or offer to sell any products made from tobacco other than cigarettes, on which the tax is not paid as provided for in 370-450. Unlawful products are contraband and subject to seizure. 370-415 requires the department's agents to seize contraband product. In order to determine whether a product is contraband, the department will review the following: the facilities and records of any manufacturer, wholesale dealer, or retail dealer, and any other place where they may have reason to believe contraband OTP are stored. Product is considered contraband product when sold by an unlicensed person, sold untaxed, or otherwise not following NRS 370. Investigators verify licensing and check invoices to verify whether purchases and payments are from licensed OTP dealers. Filing of monthly excise tax reports by the wholesaler are also checked, and audits are conducted. Investigators may work with other in-state and out-of-state agencies. For seized product that has been determined to be contraband and cannot be returned to a manufacturer or resold, the product must be destroyed. Vape products have proven to be extremely costly to store and destroy. The department is required to seize, store, and destroy illegal OTP. If the department seizes or accepts the transmission of OTP contraband from law enforcement, it will store the product through the due process period established by law for a person to appeal the department seizure through administrative appeal and/or judicial review. Upon the conclusion of any applicable due process requirements, the department will destroy the product. OTP has been federally designated as hazardous waste, in particular nicotine products, lithium batteries, and other e-liquid tobacco products. Such designation requires specific storage and/or destruction techniques that can be costly for the state. We are authorized by the FTA Uniform Exchange of Information Agreement to exchange information related to OTP business activities. The department may receive reports from other states about those who haven't paid tax on their product when shipped to Nevada. Conversely, Nevada will notify a state that a wholesaler has reported sales delivered into their state with no Nevada tax paid. In addition to seizing OTP pursuant to NRS 370-523, any company who knowingly violates any provision of Chapter 370, which includes operating without a license or buying from unlicensed sources, the department may assess civil penalties of $1,000 and no more than $5,000 for each subsequent violation of the same provision. In addition to or in lieu of any other penalty or remedy provided by law, the AG's office may seek a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 per day for any wholesale dealer or non-participating manufacturer who fails to comply with any provisions of Chapter 370 or 370A of NRS. Failing to pay taxes timely results in progressive penalties up to suspension or revocation of the license. In addition to issuing civil penalties, the department may suspend or revoke a license for reasons such as failure to pay the tax, purchasing or possessing unlawful OTP, failure to file reports, or selling untaxed product. A wholesaler who has had their license suspended or revoked in another state or is convicted of any crime relating to the manufacture, sale, or distribution of tobacco products could have their license suspended or revoked in Nevada as well. Upon finding that the licensee has knowingly or negligently failed to comply, the department may suspend the license of the licensee for not more than 60 consecutive calendar days for a first violation, and in the case of a subsequent violation, suspend the license for not more than 180 consecutive calendar days, or even permanently revoke the license. And I'll go ahead and turn this back over to Chief Deputy Navarro Stinson.
Thank you. We're wrapping up our presentation now, Madam Chair, and what we've done here on the last slide is provide some additional reference points for the committee, which include, of course, reference to NRS Chapter 370, but more specifically, the department maintains information on its website for frequently asked questions and the department's response thereto, as well as all of the department's forms for other tobacco products. And with that, Madam Chair, that wraps up the summary of our presentation, but we're happy to address any questions that you or members of the committee have.
Members, do you have any questions to Department of Tax? Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with the investigators. I'm trying to figure out what that is, which slide number that is. In my packets, it's page 69. But how many investigators are there exactly when it comes to doing the investigation necessary?
If I may, Madam Chair, I would like to introduce our tax manager, also JoLynn Smith. She's going to be available to address some of these questions in response to members.
Good morning. For the record, Jolyn Smith. We currently have 5 investigators in the south, and we have 2 in the north. But we also have a full staff of revenue officers who go also out in the field and help do investigations. We also utilize Metro Police when needed, so that we have a smaller amount of actual investigators. We do have staff in both the north and the south who help out with that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We will then move to Mr. Gendon, who will then present some tables, which is, I believe it starts on page 85 in your packet. You're going to skip over the LET, and we will go to Mr. Gendon, which is agenda item number 7.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Russell Gendon with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau. And as you stated, the information under this agenda item is in the packet. And let me share my screen. And don't plan on spending a lot of time on these so people can see them. I will point out that the tables here that were prepared for the LET and here for the OTP, the other tobacco products tax, they're similar to the structure of the tables and charts that Chair Neal has had us as staff prepare for the other revenue sources that this committee has specifically examined during its interim meetings in terms of looking at the actual collections over a fairly long historical reference period, and then looking at them on an inflation-adjusted per capita basis. And again, the construct there is to look at these various taxes in terms of their ability to keep up on a per capita as well as an inflation-adjusted basis. So what you have on your screen here is the table. And as the chair said, it begins on page 85. And so this is the table that shows the actual OTP collections from FY 1990 through FY 2021 with the economic forms forecast for FY 22 and FY 23 there. And along with the statewide population and consumer price index. And I think it's worth pointing out here now, so I don't forget to do it before I conclude, is you can see that since we have the FY 2022 economic forms forecast in here, well, in September, we will be getting reported by the Department of Taxation as well as the other agencies that collect revenue sources that this committee has examined the actual collections for FY 2022. So based on conversations with the chair, it's staff's intent to, after FY 2022 is done, is to update these tables with the actual for FY 2022 for all the revenue sources that this committee has examined, as well as once the economic forum has made its forecast this December for FY 23, FY 24, and FY 25, that those tables will be updated to include that information. So that they will be available for consideration during the 2023 session by the revenue committees if there is any interest or need for that information as a continuance of the examination that was done this interim into the 2023 session. So with this, then you can see on the chart, this just shows the growth rate in OTP collections as the blue line in relation to the growth in inflation and population, and then inflation and population combined in the green line as to the behavior of these series based on their year-to-year growth. And so you can see that the OTP has some variance in the growth rates, and it's very difficult for, I think, us as your staff and even the Department of Taxation to really be able to explain, other than right? OTP has various types of products in it, such as moist snuff, cigars, and there are other types of OTP products that were in the tax base. And then you see the significant change based on the passage of the bill in the 2019 session that added e-cigarettes, that is vapor products and alternative nicotine products, to the OTP tax base beginning in FY 2021. FY 2020, and then continuing in going forward, and obviously 2020 being affected as well as FY 21 based on the pandemic effect. So then, as we've been doing here this interim, we show the collections on the current dollars over time, and then inflation adjusted dollars per time over time. And again, you can see that it's relatively stable with some growth over the period from 1990 through 2011, even 2015, and then it started to increase. And again, that wasn't due to any change that I'm aware of by the legislature with regards to the tax base, and clearly the 30% tax rate has not been changed. But the tax base for the OTP has started to increase, and thus the collections. And then you can see the increase due to the adding alternative nicotine products and vapor products to the tax base of the OTP. So then when you go look at it on the current dollar per capita and inflation adjusted per capita, again, you see that relatively flat behavior of the tax, that it's basically maintaining itself on an inflation adjusted per capita basis up through FY 2015, and then starts to see some growth in it, and then the significant growth in inflation adjusted due, again, to the tax base change. And you can see because of the forecast, the actual collections, I believe, for FY 2022 were around 32 million, and we believe the preliminary actual collections for FY 21, FY 2022 will be around 35 million compared to around the 32 million that you see here. So it actually will, go up slightly from FY 2021 to FY 2022 as we come out of the pandemic. And so here just puts all four lines together in terms of showing them. And again, the one that we've been sort of paying attention to as we've been evaluating these revenue sources is the bottom line, which is the inflation adjusted per capita. To just see that when it's relatively flat like that, it means that it's sort of, in some sense, maintaining its an inflation adjusted per capita purchasing power. And so for the OTP, it's a difficult tax because to sort of get your mind around sometimes, because what's in the tax base and that people's consumption behavior with regards to this particular tax and the products that are in the tax base. But it has held up somewhat over time, and then we see the increase that because of adding the additional products to the tax base and where probably consumers' preferences are going to be. I think we'll have to pay attention to this because some of you may be familiar with a few months ago, the FDA issued an order or ruling that the Juul products were no longer supposed to be sold. They were able to get a stay from the court from that prohibition on being able to offer their product for sale. And then in early July, the FDA and Juul entered into an understanding that Juul's products can remain publicly available for sale while FDA continues its examination of the Juul as well as other types of vaping products. So that will be something that we'll have to pay attention to, and especially for us that track the revenue source and having to forecast it here this fall through the economic forum forecast process as to what may be the market for these types of products as FDA works through its process of evaluating the vaping type products as it relates to the issue that was going on with Juul. And so, Madam Chair, that was sort of, I think, all the information I want to provide here. I think the more important point of this here today, as well as going forward, is staff's intent based on your direction, is to, once we get the FY 2022 actuals, is to update all the charts and tables for the revenue sources that have been presented this interim to the committee, and then update them for the economic forecast for FY 23, 24, 25. And then have those available for consideration by the revenue committees, as well as talking to the chair. There were some revenue sources that the committee did not decide to specifically examine this interim, and we will consider creating tables and charts for those, such as the insurance premium tax, the gaming percentage fee tax, and so that those are also part of the information set that would be available for the Revenue Committee's consideration for the 23 session if needed. And with that, Madam Chair, I think questions that the members may have.
Thank you for that. Members, are there any questions? So is Department of Tax still on?
Yes, we sure are.
Okay, I want to ask you a question. So how many taxpayers are in OTP?
I'm sorry, this is one of our students. You may have cut out on that last question. If you could repeat it for us, please.
How many taxpayers are in the OTP category?
For the record, Jolene, are you asking how many wholesalers? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just calling them taxpayers, but yes.
I believe right now we have around 166 OTP wholesalers registered.
166.
Got it. Okay, thank you for. All right, so I want to put some stuff on the record. So we're doing this presentation and trying to give you guys this information because over the interim, I was trying to figure out how to put money into children's mental health, and I was looking for a revenue stream that was fairly stable. Knowing that we had plugged it with ARPA funds, I spoke to Director Whitley over DHHS. This was before the IFC meeting that happened. What was that? Was it last week? 2 weeks ago. It's been a rough couple of weeks. Let's just say that. And so when I talked to Director Whitley and he sent me over a budget. There are two categories in which they are spending money. One category had personnel in it that roughly they were being paid for with ARPA funds, which averaged about 1.6 million. And then there was another category of ARPA funds where they were paying or attempting to pay for like mobile crisis teams and some other things. And in their 23 budget, it was about 1.6 million roughly. And so I started thinking about talking to fiscal staff. I wanted to figure out how to have money that's working in the future that continues to build. And so this conversation was to see, is this revenue stable enough to start putting it into that budget so that in come FY 24 there is money that is building to start taking care of children's mental health. The idea is not to specifically earmark it for a certain program, but for mental health, period. And to allow the Department of DHHS to use this revenue source and know that it's there to start planning programs when that ARPA funds dissipate. And so I wanted to give that background information because it's going to be in the work session. And this is why we're doing the presentation on OTP. Because over the period of time, I've been thinking this whole interim, how do we use certain revenue sources to pay for certain needs long term and to take care of our state needs that really matter. I had no idea what the governor was going to do for IFC. I had been thinking about this prior to that, just trying to figure out how to use revenue in a way that's sustainable. And so I wanted to put that on the record before we move to the next agenda item. So you guys are like, why are we always doing these tables? But it was to help you guys see what's the revenue doing, what is it historically done, and outside of the jewel conversation, I do believe it's a stable revenue to start filling a hole in 2024. So, yeah, go ahead.
Just a real quick question for Mr. Gimbin, and on the growth in other tobacco products tax revenue graph. I think that's page 86. I think you might have explained this, but I missed it while pulling this up. When we switched over with when we changed the law in 2019, it looks like it went way up because we added those other products, but then the very next, in 21, 22, it dropped. You may have explained this, but what caused that drop? Is it just COVID or?
This, for the record, this is Russell King, Vision, and Senator Dennis. That's a good question, and I did try and touch on it, but it's a hard one. That based on the 2019 legislation, the tax change became effective January 1st, 2020 for the adding vaping and alternative nicotine products. So that bumps up the first half or the last half of FY 2020 with regards to the tax law change to the OTP tax base. Unfortunately, March 2020 was the same time that we had this sort of deal with the pandemic and supply and demand curves getting affected worldwide, let alone the impact on the state of Nevada. So then when you see the chart there, the last actual that you have is FY21, which would have been the last actual data that we had to be able to put these charts. So you see it coming down because of that was the Economics Forum's forecast that was done in May of 21, based on the information set available then as we were working through coming out of the pandemic and coming out and what effect that might have on the international, national, and state economy. So we had that was the forecast. 21 actually was stronger than what we thought compared to the forecast. And as I said, right now the preliminary information we have for the actual collections for FY 2022 for the 12 months of FY 22 appears that the actual collections, I believe, will be around 35 million. And so that we expect this line not to go down like it shows for the forecast, that the collections will actually go up in FY 22 compared to FY 21, which I appreciate your question, because that I think helps why it's important for these tables for all these revenue sources to be updated for the FY 2022 actual, and then to be updated with the Economic Forum's December 2022 forecast in, because they're a little out of sync, because as you're aware, not just OTP, but sales tax, gaming taxes, all of them are doing much better in FY 22 than what was forecast based on the outlook for things back in 2020. So I know that's a long answer, but that's why you see it fall, because you're looking at an actual compared to a forecast that's probably, the forecast is being demonstrated to be not very accurate to what's actually, so thus the need to update these for consideration during session.
And that would be true also of all the other charts on here, right? That you're using projections for 22.
Yeah, going from memory and what we know based on the current year-to-date actuals, yeah, probably for almost all the revenue sources that this actually did consider, such as the sales tax, cigarette taxes, liquor taxes, commerce tax, the marijuana taxes, almost all of those are coming in above forecast. I believe the cigarette tax was one of the ones that was probably closer to the forecast, but most of the other ones, yes. Instead of that line coming down like you see it here in FY22 and then staying down there in FY23, once we update them to include the FY 2022 actual and most likely the economic forms forecast for FY23, FY24, and FY25, keep those lines come up and not go down.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
So I have Assemblywoman Kasama before Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I like this idea of allocating a stream of revenue for mental health issues that people can depend on year after year and start planning the program. So I think I like the idea of this. My question would be maybe for when we're in session with some more information, how much is the general fund currently allocating to mental health issues? So if we allocate this, all of this 30%, it'd be interesting to see a comparison what we've already been doing, but this will, instead of that changing every time and people have to vote on it, so to speak, this will be an allocation. So I'd just be curious to see what amounts we'd be doing, what the projection is from this, and how they differ, just for information. And I'm not asking for that right now. I'm just saying that would be good information for the future as we analyze this more.
Mr. Gendon, I mean, I know you guys don't have that.
So I apologize. So for the record, we're also getting with the fiscal division, and I appreciate the Assemblywoman giving us the out that she is not expecting the information here, because it's more of a program thing. So we will, with the chair's direction, then we can talk to our colleagues in the fiscal division who would deal with the budget accounts that are affiliated with mental health programs and the revenues coming into that and the expenditures on it, to work to have that information available during session. And obviously, that would be timely then at that point in time, because it would include recommendations included in the governor's executive budget for the next biennium with regards to mental health programs and the recommended spending on those. So, Madam Chair, we can just sort of add this, take this request and work with our fiscal division colleagues to have that information available for you and the committee members during session.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gendon. And later I can share the budget that Mr. Whitley sent to me, so you guys can just have that and build from there as you get your other parts of the information set. Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. And I think this is for Director Hughes and your team. With the NRS 370.038 definition of other tobacco products defined, I just want to make sure where it's any alternative nicotine product, does that include like the nicotine gums and the nicotine patches and the cessation products? And I'm not talking about the vaping. I know that's a big issue right now and a question mark, but are the people who are buying the nicotine gum paying the 30% tax?
For the record, Jolyn Smith, as long as they're federally recognized as cessation devices. So there are some, and I'm not promoting anything, I'm just saying like your Nicorette, I believe that one is a federally recognized as cessation, but it's my understanding that there are some kind of like off-brands that aren't federally regulated, so those would be subject to OTP.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any additional questions? Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you. You had mentioned on page 89 about the Jewel lawsuit impact. would that be positive or negatively impacted, or do we know yet? Is it still too early to find out what kind of impact that could have? Because I have not been following it, so any clarification would be greatly appreciated.
Madam Chair, this is Russell again with the Fiscal Analysis Division. And I think the answer is, from my information set of following the issue, is that I don't think specifically with respect to the Juul products, it would have had an effect. Because my understanding is the FDA was saying that they were no longer supposed to be able to sell them. And don't even ask me to explain the federal regulatory process that vaping products are supposed to go through, be recognized, be allowed for sale. But when, I think it was back in May, when the FDA made that determination with regard to Juul, and then Juul went to court, and they got the court to put a stay on it. And then it's my understanding from the information set available that in July is when the two sides are supposed to be providing their responses to the court. And so in early July, FDA and Juul were able to reach an understanding where the FDA would withdraw their order or determination and allow Juul to continue to sell their products while the FDA continued to evaluate the information that Juul had provided with regards to the regulatory process that the FDA does for vaping products. And so based on that, then I would have to conclude there was no effect on OTP in the state of Nevada with regards to the Juul products, because they never had to quit selling them based on my understanding of the information set that's available from the FDA, and it was going to the court and then the court order.
Okay, thank you for that. So with that, we will go ahead and move into agenda item number 8, which is the work session discussion and possible action on the recommendations for other tobacco products tax and then the property tax. There are 2 items on today's work session. I will ask Mr. Nakamoto to go through each one separately, and then we'll take any questions related to the work session proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. The work session document can be found on page 95 in the meeting packet for today. Just as a reminder, the committee has been limited to 10 legislative measures, including the drafting of resolutions pursuant to NRS 218D.160, which is the general law that applies to these joint interim standing committees. The items that were placed in this document for the committee's consideration were based on recommendations that were submitted by the chair or members of the committee that the chair wished to bring forward for consideration today. The members of the committee do not necessarily support or oppose the recommendations in this work session document, and the committee does have the prerogative to accept, reject, modify, or take no action on the recommendations contained therein. The first of the recommendations is on the other tobacco products tax. The chair just gave a lot of the background related to this. The Department of Taxation in their presentation also gave some background on this item, specifically noting that the proceeds from this tax, the other tobacco products tax, are currently dedicated to the State General Fund 100%. The proposal on today's work session would be to draft a bill amending NRS 370.500, which is the section of the NRS that contains the direction for the proceeds for this revenue to be deposited in the State General Fund, to instead require a portion of the revenue be allocated to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health of the Department of Health and Human Services. The amount of the revenue allocated to this purpose would be $1.6 million in FY24. But in FY25 and in subsequent fiscal years, there would be an escalator. The allocation would increase from the allocation in the prior fiscal year by the greater of 2% or the 5-year average percentage increase in the consumer price index. And you'll note in the work session document, we have specified a certain index, and that would be the All Urban Consumers West Region Consumer Price Index that is published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the U.S. Department of Labor. Madam Chair, would you like me to go to the second item, or would you like to take questions on this one?
So I'll take questions. Are there any questions on the work session language? Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you. My question is, you had mentioned 2 sections or 2 options. One was personnel, and then the other one was like the crisis mobile teams. So was this 1.6 million covering one or both or a mixture?
So make sure I say this right, Mr. Nakamoto, but the plan is that there would be 1.6 million that would be given off the top, and then there would be the escalator, which then makes sure that it continues to grow. And so it is an annual allocation, correct, Mr. Nakamoto? That's what we discussed.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay. So it would cover 2 things that were currently in the budget that was submitted to me that are 2 categories. But I'm just saying that just to give some point of reference, but I am not prescribing what particular program they pay it for, just that it is there to offset children's mental health, right? They have several programs that they're trying to fund and maintain, the mobile crisis team being one of them. That is not, I would say, could lose funding because of its ARPA designation that is attached to it. And so what I'm trying to do is buffer it. And so with 1.6 million each year, they would then have, a nice amount that would then grow. And so the idea is that over a period of time, we will get this money to grow and then be established, and then along with any additional grants and other things that they may bring to the table. Any additional questions? Okay, so we should take these separately, though. Do you want to go and explain the property tax one? Or I'll just go ahead. Let's just deal with them separately. So I'll go ahead and ask for a motion on the first item, which is the other tobacco products tax, which would be 1.6 million annually starting in FY 2024, and then grow with inflation. It would have an inflationary measure that would just add to. Are there any questions on? What are you saying, Assemblyman Haven? Oh, okay. So I'm gonna ask for him. He's throwing me off today. That's why I like him. Okay. So I want to ask for a motion in favor. If there's any motion in favor for the OTP. To move the OTP on the work session document, all in favor. Well, can I get a first for approval? Okay, Assemblyman Hafen, can I get a second? Senator Dennis, all in favor? Oh, discussion on the motion. Do I have any discussion on the motion? Go ahead. Senator Dennis.
So I think this is an important, for the session to really have this discussion and work this out. So I think that as a committee, I think we've looked at all these different things throughout the interim, and I think this is something that would be important to have a discussion as we move forward. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, so closing discussion. I will, all in favor of moving this work session item out of interim revenue? Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, motion. Go ahead.
I just want to be clear. We're making a motion to move forward for this to be move forward as a BDR.
Correct.
For coming from this committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So with everyone in favor and no one opposing, the motion passes unanimously to move this forward as a BDR from the Interim Revenue Committee and provide updated tables when we come to session to see the actual dollar amount, and then bring the Division of Behavioral Health to the table to add some more continuity to the issue. Okay, thank you, everyone. We will now move to B, property tax. Mr. Nakamoto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. The second and final item on today's work session is on page 96 of the packet, and as the chair noted, deals with property taxes, which were discussed at the last meeting of the Revenue Joint Interim Standing Committee back on July 7th. The proposal here is to draft a bill amending subsection 1 of NRS 361.4722, which provides a partial abatement for property taxes for all properties that are not single-family owner-occupied residential properties or eligible residential rental dwellings, which each separately get an abatement such that their taxes cannot go up by more than 3% per year in NRS 361.4723 and 361.4724. The bill that would be drafted would revise the current abatement for the properties that don't qualify for those abatements, so the ones that would be covered under 361.4722, which currently specifies that the annual increase in the property tax may not exceed a percentage between 0 and 8% based on several statutory formulas that are specified in that subsection. The percentages would be amended such that the annual increase in the property tax bill may not exceed a percentage between 3% and 8% based on the statutory formulas. So the only thing that would change in there is that 0 to 8 range would change to 3% to 8%. As part of the proposal within this item in the work session. I would note, as you can see at the bottom of that the proposed recommendation here is identical to the provisions of Assembly Bill 43 of the 2017 session, as well as Senate Bill 10 of the 2021 session. Madam Chair, if there are any questions, I would be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, any questions on this one? Okay, so the Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to vote this out of committee so we continue to have discussion. I think one of the concerns I have, I feel like we keep kind of patching at the property taxes, and perhaps it's, I would like that we look at a way to simplify it all over. We're one of the few states that have depreciation in our property taxes as well. So I think it's good to continue the discussion on this.
So thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama. I appreciate that. There are a lot of property tax ideas that are on the table, but there was not enough time, not in this interim, to vet them and go through what it's going to look like. But trying to, where I know that my particular agenda is not to piecemeal it, but to actually try to put something forth that makes sense. But this was one of the measures that it mitigates a low or negative assessment that we've had in the past, try to make sure it doesn't happen in the future, and gives us some stability. But there are some future measures for us to debate extensively during the session. And either just be like, I hate all of you and I love this property tax bill, or move it forward. But there's going to be some interesting movement in this space. We just didn't have enough time, because it's an in-depth topic that takes time, and we'll try to get those BDRs. At least you'll have an idea of what they are prior to us coming up there. But I will go ahead if there's any other questions on this property tax piece. Assemblyman Haven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to echo your statements and my colleague, Assemblywoman Kasama's comments that I do think that there are a lot of the abatements that need to be looked at, specifically some of the solar stuff that we had talked about in previous that are selling to other states. And so I'm in favor of moving this forward, but I do think the conversation needs to continue as we move forward towards session. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Any additional questions? All right, so I will ask for a motion to approve the property tax. I have a first from Senator Dennis. Do I have a second? I have a second from Assemblywoman Cohen. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, then we have a unanimous vote to move the property tax BDR to the regular session to continue conversation and also have additional revenue conversation around property tax. Thank you all. We will move to agenda item number 9 for public comment. Is there anyone that has come online, BPS, for public comment?
Chair, your public line is still open and working, and you have no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. And so as a reminder, these are BDRs that are moving to a particular committee, either on the Senate side or the Assembly side. And I want to thank you all for coming and for having a wonderful interim and the tables that we've had. It's been a lot, and so we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
Quickly, how quickly they finished.